I can't believe you're doing this. Have you not even considered how this will affect me or the kids? The woman said. Look, I don't need a house that size. I'm moving out. You're welcome to stay if you can afford it. Hey, it's not my fault. You don't have a job to support yourself, the man said. You never wanted me to work, Greg. I gave all that up for you, my career, all that education, all down the drain, just to be the kind of wife you wanted. Charlotte, Greg, please. This isn't going to help things now. The divorce lawyer sitting across from them intervened. What we need to do now is come up with an agreement on terms you both can agree to. The couple sat next to each other in the divorce lawyer's office, their best days far behind them. They'd gone from loving husband and wife to enemies. But the change definitely had not come overnight. This day had been a long time in the making. It had gotten to the point to where they just let the relationship deteriorate and not put in any effort to save it, thinking the problems would just work themselves out by themselves. Not even the 2 kids they shared could save their marriage now. It was over, and they couldn't be done with each other fast enough. They sat there and hashed out their grievances to the lawyer and signed the divorce papers when agreement was met. After the meeting, the 2 carried on their conversation outside the office. You know, I really don't know what you expect us to do or where to go, Charlotte said. Look, the mortgage is already paid off for another 3 months. Just go get a job. I mean, hell, you're going to be getting child support. What more do you want from me? You're not my responsibility anymore. And what about your daughters? Are they not your responsibility anymore either? She shot back. Look, Charlotte, I love my daughters, and I will always take care of them. But you're just going to have to fend for yourself now. This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? Freedom. Greg always gets what Greg wants. And I'm sure your new girlfriend tells you exactly everything that you want to hear, doesn't she? I'm sure she feeds that big, out-of-control ego of yours, huh? Tells you everything you want to hear. Look, and you barely even call to check up on the girls. You don't even know how they're doing. Look, Charlotte, I don't have time for this. Is there anything else we need to discuss? No, Greg. We're done. Charlotte turned and walked away. She was hurt and angry, but mostly just angry. She drove to her sister's house to pick up her daughters, Clara, 7, and Kate, 5. Charlotte blasted the radio. Overcome with emotions, she screamed to try to let out some of her frustration before she reached her sister's house. It helped, but she still felt angry behind Greg's betrayal. But she knew she had to be strong for her daughters now. She pulled up into the driveway, lowered the music, and then composed herself before getting out of the car. She took a deep breath, then went inside the house. Mommy! The 2 girls, excited to see her, came and greeted her at the door. Hi, my loves. Did you have fun with your Aunt Teresa and your cousins? We did. Did you bring us something back like ice cream? Clara, the oldest of the 2, asked. Not this time. Maybe next time, okay? You go play with your cousins. I'm gonna go talk to your Aunt Teresa. Charlotte walked into the kitchen. Her sister Teresa was washing dishes. Hey sis, how'd it go? Teresa asked. Oh, you know, same old a-hole he always is. You know, I don't know how I stayed married to him for so long. Well, we got 3 months in the house before he puts it on the market. I'm gonna have to get a job. What kind of work do you want to do? I don't know. You know, I haven't worked in years. The child support will help, but the mortgage is so expensive. I'm just gonna have to work. I have to give the girls a good life. None of this is their fault. Thank God for my anxiety meds, huh? Well, you know, you can always stay with us if you need to. Philip won't mind, and you know we love having the girls here. Thank you, Teresa, but with you, Philip, your 3 kids taking on me and my 2 girls, that's just asking too much. Well, think about it. You know, you and the girls are always more than welcome." "Thanks, sis." When Charlotte and the girls made it back to the house that day, she prepared dinner and later got them to bed. She sat alone in the living room, having a cup of tea, thinking about the future for her and the girls. What did it look like? She had allowed herself to become dependent upon her ex-husband, against her better judgment, and it blew up in her face. How could he have betrayed them and left them? Did he ever really even love her? Or had she just failed as a wife? Could she provide for her children as a single mother? The thoughts raced to her head. The life that she thought would last forever was officially over with the stroke of a pen, and the future uncertain. Charlotte finished her tea and went to bed. The next morning, Charlotte got up and made breakfast for her and the girls. It was summer, so school was out. As they sat and ate, Kate, the youngest, asked, "Mommy, so is Daddy never going to have breakfast with us again?" Charlotte looked over at the little girl, but before she could answer, Claire answered for her. "Daddy and Mommy are divorced now. That means they don't love each other anymore." "That's not what that means," Charlotte said. Then she paused and thought about it. That's exactly what that meant. She felt embarrassed that her 7-year-old seemed to understand it better than she did. "Well, what does it mean then, Mommy? Do you and Daddy still love each other?" Claire asked. No, we don't." Starting to feel emotional, Charlotte quickly gathered herself. "Hurry up now. You two are going to your aunt's again today. Me and your aunt are going shopping." They finished breakfast and got ready to go. It was a beautiful day out. Claire and her sister had gone shopping at a local strip mall. They stopped for a bite to eat and even had some mimosas to drink. They talked and Charlotte felt more optimistic about the future for her and the girls. They were headed to a popular boutique when they noticed a familiar car. It looked like Greg's, Charlotte's ex-husband. A moment later, Greg, accompanied by a younger woman, came out of the store the car was parked in front of. She was pretty and wore a pair of shorts that Charlotte would never dare squeeze into. Greg held her hand, shopping bags in the other. He opened the door for her, and she got in. Charlotte couldn't remember the last time he'd done that for her, let alone held her hand. He looked happy. She could see the pride beaming from his face. She squeezed her water bottle tight in hand, wishing she could throw it at his face. He never even saw them. He drove away with his new girlfriend, and that was that. Teresa put her arms around Charlotte. "Hey, maybe she'll give him an STD and take all of his money." The two burst into laughter, but Charlotte was very hurt by seeing that. Charlotte dropped off Teresa, and her girls went back to the house. She couldn't take her mind off of seeing Greg with the woman, how happy he looked, and how hurt she felt. She didn't want to be out with the girls and them see her with the other woman. It was just too painful. She began to feel angry. Then she'd made up her mind. She was going to move away. Charlotte got online and searched for jobs and houses outside the city. She wanted a fresh start for her and her girls. She began to search for work in more rural areas. She herself had grown up in a small town and loved it, and thought it would be a good change for her and her daughters. The small town sense of community and hospitality was something she missed, and the big city was just getting too expensive and competitive for finding work. She'd always wanted to move back to a small town, but Greg was a city guy. He never liked the small town vibe. She liked the city at one time, but that all wore off once it got too crowded. She craved a simpler life and could now have that with her girls. She searched for days looking for a house that she could afford and a job she could get with relatively little experience. There wasn't much, but she came across something that looked promising. 2 towns over, and about an hour and a half away, she found a small attorney's office that had an open position for a file clerk. Charlotte's last job had been years ago, but she worked in an office as an assistant, and she still remembered a bit of it. There was a small single-family house for sale on about 2 acres of land that seemed to be selling at a very low price as well. With the money from the divorce, the child support, and the job, this could be the fresh start she wanted. Charlotte just needed a chance, so she called the law office the next day to set up an interview. And they were more than happy to give her one. They actually seemed excited that someone from a bigger city had taken interest in the position. Charlotte was excited. She then called the seller of the house to schedule an appointment on the same day as the interview. It would be a couple of weeks before she could move in, but the seller had no problem with that. It seems as though there hadn't really been any interest in the house, and it would likely still be available. Charlotte felt everything was going smoothly and falling into place, as if it were meant to be. She really wanted this to work. Later that day, she called her sister and told her the news. "Charlotte, why do you have to move so far out? It's always almost 2 hours away. Just find something closer." "I'm pretty sure there's a lot of jobs around here you could find," Teresa tried to convince her. "You don't even know anybody there." "Well, it's just an idea," Charlotte said. "Look, I need a fresh start. We grew up in a small town. I've always wanted to move back to one, and it's just an hour and a half away. We could visit on weekends. Look, I haven't even gotten the job yet, but I really want this to work. I want to try it. Will you just support me on this, please?" Reluctantly, Teresa said okay to her sister's decision. "Well, okay, but I hope they say no," she joked. The two laughed, and a couple of days later, Charlotte dropped off the girls at her sister's house and drove out to the town for the interview. It seemed like the perfect day, and Charlotte, though nervous, was excited about the looming opportunity for the big life change. Upon reaching the town, it was just as she imagined. Small, charming, and slow-paced. The lack of traffic was a dream come true. It was peaceful and seemed like another world away from the city. She arrived at the law office, a small one-story brick building with a couple of cars out front. Charlotte parked and took a deep breath. "Okay, Charlotte, time to razzle-dazzle," she said to herself. She looked at herself in the mirror, smiled, got out and went in. Charlotte was greeted at the door by an older woman, whom she assumed to be the receptionist. The woman was friendly and filled with small-town charm. Charlotte was taken to a room in the back where she was interviewed by the attorney. Charlotte was fearful that her lack of work history would hinder her, but they were delighted to make her a part of their small group and offered her the job. "Well, I assume you'll be moving here," the attorney asked. "Have you found a place yet?" "I'm actually going to check a house out after I leave here today. I believe it's off of Anacoco Street." The attorney's face seemed to shift to a more serious expression. Catching himself, he forced a half-hearted smile. "Anacoco, you say? Which house, if you don't mind me asking?" "There's a small white and green house with a pond in the backyard. It's a little off the road, kind of tucked away." The attorney shifted in his seat. He looked a little uneasy. Yeah, I know the place. Tell me something, Charlotte. Do you have any children?" "Yes, 2 girls, 7 and 5. He just stared for a moment. Charlotte, picking up on his attitude, asked was everything all right. "Oh, yeah, everything's fine. I'm just trying to figure out the exact house that you're referring to." "Well, I hope you like it. Have you considered any other houses? That might be a little too much land to keep up with. There's a lot of nice houses around here." "Well, anyway, we're happy to have you on board, Charlotte." Charlotte was so excited about the job, She didn't seem to pay attention to the attorneys low-key convincing her to consider another house. She left the office and drove out to the house. Upon arrival, she saw that the owner was already there. An older man with a big smile on his face got out of his car. He looked like a small-town preacher in a cheap suit. "You must be Charlotte. Welcome to your new home," he said, walking over to her, holding out a set of keys. "Oh, well, can I see the house first?" Charlotte said playfully. "Oh, of course, how silly of me. I'm just excited someone's finally moving in. It's a fine house. Been empty too long. Come on, let me show you around." They walked into the house. It was small and cozy, an older home full of old-style charm. "I love it. It'll be perfect for me and my girls." The owner looked at her, but he didn't say anything. He just smiled and shook his head yes. "Here, let me show you the backyard." She followed him out. Charlotte's eyes scanned the spacious yard until they focused on the small pond to the left near the end of the yard. It was still and dark. It looked like a big black hole in the ground. Charlotte stared at the pond and thought, would it be safe for the girls? But she convinced herself she could make it work. "So what do you think?" he asked. "Yes, I'll take it," Charlotte said. He handed over the keys to her. She prepared to write a check for the first month's payment, but he stopped her. "First month's on the house." She thanked him, they shook hands, and she left. Charlotte was so excited the whole ride home. She couldn't wait to tell her sister and the girls. She could envision herself in her mind living in the wonderful little house and the girls playing in the yard, becoming part of the community. When she arrived back in the city, she went to her sister's house to pick up the girls. Charlotte and her sister sat in the kitchen and had a cup of coffee while she told her the news. "Charlotte, are you sure about this? I mean, really sure? And what do you think Greg's gonna say? Look, Greg made his choice. He chose himself over us. I have to do what's best for us now. But don't you think this is a bit impulsive? I mean, you're always just jumping into things. Hey. You said you were going to support me on this, right? Please, just support me. If it doesn't work out, I can always come back." The sisters hugged, and Charlotte and the girls left. When they got home, she called Greg to tell him the news. And not much to her surprise, he seemed to take the news very well and was supportive of her decision, as long as he got to see the girls on the weekend when she came back. He even offered to help pay for some of the moving costs, which Charlotte accepted. The day of the big move finally came, and Charlotte had arranged for the movers to take everything to the house ahead of their leaving. She said goodbye to her sister. She, along with the girls, were very excited to start the new life. On the ride there, Charlotte told them how they had their own pond and a big yard with plenty of land to run around on. She was glad they would get to experience some of how she grew up and had gotten away from the city. When they arrived in town, it was already later in the day and raining, so they went to the house and began unpacking. The girls loved the house, even though it was smaller than what they were used to. They loved the big yard and all the trees. After a night of unpacking, Charlotte made the girls sandwiches and they went to bed. The rain poured that night as the girls slept in their room. Clara was awakened by the sound of children playing in the backyard. She got up and walked to the window to take a look. In the bright moonlight, she saw what looked like 3 kids standing in front of the pond, staring in her direction. They didn't move, and it was too dark to see their faces. They just stood there in the rain, staring. Claire went back to bed and fell asleep. The next morning, while having breakfast, the girls ate and Charlotte continued unpacking. "Mommy, are there any kids that live around here?" I don't know, maybe. Why?" Claire swallowed her cereal. "I saw some kids last night, outside." "Last night?" Charlotte said. Sweetie, you couldn't have. It was raining, and it was late. But they were in our backyard, Clara said. Ooh, I want to play with them, Kate, the youngest girl, said. Charlotte, not quite knowing what to think of it, told the girls she would find out if there were kids around there, and continued unpacking. Charlotte would be starting work next week, and had already found a babysitter for the girls, so most of her time was spent unpacking and cleaning. When most of it was done, they went to town to get to know the place and to go shopping. They loved it. The small town experience was just what Charlotte was looking for, and the girls seemed to like it too. The people were friendly and welcoming. Charlotte and the girls felt right at home. That night, it rained again, and after going to bed, Clara was awakened again by the sound of kids playing in the yard. She went to the window to see, but this time, the kids were standing right outside her window, standing in the rain. They just stood there smiling, soaked and wet. It was 2 girls and 1 boy. The girl in the middle stepped forward. She had long, dark hair and big, dark eyes. She waved at Clara, and Clara waved back. Hi, I'm Laura. What's your name? Clara. That's a pretty name. These are my friends, Billy and Victoria. The other 2 kids waved at Clara. Both had big, programmed smiles on their faces. Hey, come out and play with us, Laura said. No, I can't. My mom says it's too late, and I'll get sick from getting wet. Oh, come on, you won't get sick. And we won't play for long. We just want to show you the yard and stuff, Laura said. Looking back at the other 2, the other girl, Victoria, a redhead, stepped up. Please come out. It's a really fun place. Right, Billy? She looked over at the boy, but he didn't speak. He just smiled and nodded slowly. Okay, but not too long, okay? Clara said. The children cheered and jumped up and down with excitement. Clara quietly slipped out of the house and went into the backyard to meet the kids. They stood there in front of her in single-file line. Their stares were so focused on her, and their smiles fixed. Welcome to the Rainy Kids Club, Laura said. Let's welcome our new friend. They all hugged Clara. She noticed, even though it was warm outside, the kids felt really cold. They squeezed themselves against her, as if trying to warm up. They played a couple of games before Clara told them she had to go back inside. They all looked sad as she told them goodnight. When can we play again? Clara asked. When it rains, Laura said. The kids walked into the direction of the pond. Clara curiously followed behind them. Where do you live? Laura turned and smiled. We live in there. She pointed at the pond. In the pond? What do you mean? Clara was confused. We have a house down there. It looks a little like your house. We get to watch the fish swim past the windows. You want to come see? The smiles on the kids' faces stretched even wider, looking almost cartoonish. But Clara got scared. No, I have to go home now. Okay, well, maybe next time, Laura said. Clara watched as the kids jumped into the pond and went under the water. She stood there for a moment, staring in disbelief and amazement as the water went still. Then, the 3 kids' heads emerged from the water, as if being raised up. They smiled at her. Good night, Clara, they said, then sank into the pond. Clara went back into the house and went to bed. The next morning, when Charlotte went to wake the girls for breakfast, she noticed the wet clothes on the floor and woke Clara up. Clara, why are your clothes wet? Clara was hesitant to answer. Come on, tell me. I went outside last night to play with my friends. They were outside last night and wanted me to come play with them. Charlotte looked puzzled. Claire, what are you talking about? There are no kids around here. Yes, there are, Mommy. Their names are Laura, Victoria, and Billy. Claire, are you sure you didn't just dream this? No, I promise. They're my friends. Charlotte looked at the wet clothes on the floor. Okay, but if your friends come back again, come and get me next time. I want to talk to their parents, okay? Later that day, getting more unpacking done, Charlotte overheard Claire tell Kate about her new friends and how they said if they come back, maybe they can bring her outside to play with them too. Girls, what do you say we go for a walk? Charlotte wanted to get some fresh air, but she also wanted to see if there were other kids in the area and see if she could find these kids that Claire was playing with. While on the walk, they explored their new neighborhood. It was a sunny day. Claire, we've been walking for a while now, and I don't see any other kids, and there are no houses that are close to ours. Where do your friends live? Oh, they live in the pond in our backyard, she answered. What did you say? They live in the pond in our backyard. The answer made Charlotte uneasy. Come on, let's go back home. That's enough walking for today. When they got back to the house, the girls went to their room, and Charlotte went back to working on the house. She thought about what Clara had said about the kids in the pond. It scared her a bit, but she mostly just thought it was her imagination. But what about the wet clothes and her sneaking out of the house at night with that pond back there? She could drown. She began to wonder if moving there had been such a good idea after all. Was it safe? Had she been impulsive? Maybe she could just fence the area off. Yeah, that would make her feel better if she could do that. That night before bed, she told Clara not to go outside if the kids came back. She made her promise. The kids, fortunately, did not come back that night, nor did they come back for the next 4 nights. Clara hadn't mentioned them, so Charlotte felt more at ease. They decided to go for a walk that day and came upon a house not far from theirs. There was a woman in the yard tending to her garden. Charlotte waved at the woman, and the woman waved back. Hi there. Are y'all the ones that moved into the house down the road? Yes, me and my girls. The woman stood up and came to greet them. Hi, I'm Rose. She wiped her hands on her pants and shook Charlotte's hand. She looked like the quintessential small-town woman. Her cheeks were ruby red from the sun. I'm Charlotte. These are my girls, Clara and Kate. Well, hello there. And aren't you two just the cutest little things? How would you like some homemade chocolate chip cookies? The girls' faces lit up. Oh, no, you don't have to do that, Charlotte protested. But Rose was insistent. This was the small-town charm that she wanted. So she said okay. She didn't want to come across as unfriendly. Well, come on in. It's just me and my husband, Bob. We're both retired and don't get too much company. Besides, it'll be nice having these little angels in here for a while. Plus, we can talk and have some coffee. Charlotte met Bob, who was just as welcoming as Rose, and the girls entertained themselves with some toys and dolls left at the house by Rose's grandchildren, while the 3 of them had coffee in the kitchen. The conversation was to be expected. Where was she from? What had brought her there? But took a strange turn when Rose asked, how was she enjoying the house? Oh, I love it. It's exactly what I was looking for. Rose was very chatty and didn't seem to have a problem asking questions. A bit nosy, but very friendly. Have you experienced anything strange in that house? Huh? What do you mean, strange? Rose and her husband looked at each other. Bob then excused himself. Ladies, if you excuse me, I have to make a quick phone call. But I'll be back. Once alone, Charlotte asked again. Rose, what did you mean by strange? Well, Bob and I used to live in that house a long time ago. Back when we had one child, our son John. He must have been about, around 6 or 7 at the time. He would always tell us these stories about these kids coming to play with him. Now, mind you, kids we never saw. Well, one night we heard him screaming outside in the backyard. He'd slipped into that pond back there and almost drowned. We ran back there and Bob jumped in and pulled him out. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I swear, we heard what sounded like kids laughing coming from that pond as we ran back to the house. I looked back, but there was nobody there. Well, long story short, we packed up and moved to my parents'. That house is pretty old, so we started asking questions about it. Rose stopped. Maybe I shouldn't be telling you this stuff. No, go on. Charlotte was too vested in the story now. Well, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I found out that 3 kids have died in that house. One little girl drowned in that pond back there during a heavy rainstorm. A little boy hanged himself from one of those trees in the backyard. And another little girl drank poison. The odd thing is it's always children that have died there. As far as I know, nothing ever happens to the adults. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. Charlotte just sat there for a moment with a blank expression on her face. No, I'm glad you told me. I can't believe the owner didn't even mention any of this, especially knowing that I have children. Rose made a dismissive gesture with her hand. Oh, that guy is as slick as an oil can. He just wanted to make the sale. But hey, these things happened a long time ago. People have been in and out of there since then. Charlotte finished up her coffee, thanked Rose, and her and the girls went home. The walk home was nerve-wracking. Charlotte thought about everything that Rose had said and the fact that Clara was now saying that she was playing with these mystery children. 3 kids, in fact. 2 girls and a boy. She hoped it all would pass. And what could she do? She just moved in. That night, it rained again. It poured steadily until bedtime. Charlotte sat with the girls for a while, then went to bed. Now remember what I told you, Clara. No going outside. Okay, Mommy, Clara said. Charlotte left and went to bed. Hey, if your friends come back, can I go play with them too? Kate asked. No, Mommy said no more playing outside. The 2 girls went to sleep. But not long after, there was a tapping at the window. Clara got up to see. It was the kids. Clara slid the window open. I can't play with you anymore. My mom says I can't go out. Laura stepped forward. Come out, please. We don't have to play. We have a surprise for you. We want to show you something. Okay, but I can't stay long, Clara said as she went out to the backyard. She walked over to the kids, looking down at her feet, squishing through the wet grass. The kids waited for her by the pond. Clara made it to the kids. She looked up and gasped. The look of fear was on her face. The kids' faces had changed. Laura's skin looked as though it was melting away, and her eyes were all white. Billy's face looked swollen and blue, and his eyes bulged out of the sockets. And Victoria was covered in what looked like vomit, her eyes sunken in. Clara began to back away. The kids, in sync, took their hands and slowly waved them upwards in front of their faces, and their faces changed back to normal. Surprise! Laura and Victoria cheerfully said. Neat trick, huh? We can do all kinds of fun tricks. We want to show you how to do them. Laura said. Victoria stepped up and grabbed Clara's hand, and Billy went and stood behind her. He never said a word. Clara saw scars on his neck as he passed by. "Come to our house," Victoria said, pulling Clara toward the pond. "We'll show you a bunch of cool things. We have so much fun down there." Laura stood there smiling, her eyes big and dark. "No, I have to go back inside." Clara snatched her hand away from Victoria. Billy grabbed at her pajama top, tearing it at the shoulder. "I have to go before my mom wakes up." Clara ran for the house. The rain poured, and the kids followed behind her. "Clara, wait!" Laura called out. Her voice sounded distorted. "We have something we want to show you." But Clara kept running until she made it to the house. She quickly went into her room and looked out the window. The kids were standing in front of the pond. They always seemed to make it back to the pond so quickly. Their eyes were glowing like 6 dim flashlights in the dark. They backed into the pond, their eyes fixed on her until they disappeared under the water. Clara took off her wet clothes and tossed them under the bed, hoping that her mom wouldn't find them. She changed into dry pajamas and went to sleep. The next day, Clara didn't tell her mom about what had happened the previous night. But Charlotte was cleaning the girls' room later and found the wet pajamas underneath Clara's bed. "Clara!" Charlotte called out. "Come here now." Clara came into the room. Charlotte held up the wet clothes. "Did you go outside again last night?" Clara didn't answer. "Well, did you?" Clara shook her head yes. "What did I tell you about doing that?" Clara began to cry. She looked scared. The look was different from what Charlotte was used to seeing when she was upset. "Clara, did something happen last night? Did those kids come back?" Clara ran and jumped into her mother's arms, crying. "They tried to take me with them into the pond. They're monsters, Mommy, and they want to take me with them. I don't want to play with them anymore. Please, can we just leave?" Kate came in after hearing all the commotion. She came over and hugged Clara, comforting her big sister. "Okay, tomorrow we're going to stay with your Aunt Teresa for a couple of days until I get things figured out. We can't just move." Charlotte called her sister and explained everything that was going on. Teresa couldn't believe it, but she was happy to put them up for as long as they needed. They packed a few things and prepared for the trip back to the city. As darkness fell and it became late, the girls slept in Charlotte's bed. Things were quiet and seemed normal. It was a peaceful night, and Charlotte felt more at ease, especially since it wasn't raining. She noticed that the kids only seem to come when it rains. But then she began to hear soft drops of water. She prayed it would stop, but it began to pour. Everything was fine for about 20 minutes. Then there was a knock at the front door. Charlotte sat up. The girls were still asleep. She waited for a moment, and then knocks at the door again. Charlotte got up and went to see who it was. The house was quiet. She opened the front door, but there was no one there. She just stared out into nothingness. She went to close the door. Then she heard the sound of children playing outside and laughing. She looked around, but there were no children, just darkness and trees. Charlotte closed the door, then heard a loud from the back of the house. She jumped at the sound. She was scared, but forced herself to go to where the sound had come from. She passed the kitchen, and the lightning flashed. She saw something on the floor. She turned on the lights and saw muddy footprints on the floor. They were small, like children's feet. Then, the lights went out. Charlotte flicked the light switch on and off, but it was no use. It remained dark. She went to the drawer and grabbed a flashlight and turned it on. The house smelled like a swamp. The strong smell lingered in the air. Charlotte checked the rest of the house, but found nothing, and all was quiet again. She began to feel a little more relieved, so she went back to the room to check on the girls. She slowly pushed the door open and screamed at what she saw. She flashed the light on the bed. There were two little girls standing over her sleeping daughters, and one was pouring Charlotte's anxiety pills into Clara's mouth. At the same time, both girls slowly turned their heads and stared at Charlotte blankly. Their faces pale and wet, their lips a dark gray. Charlotte screamed, "No, stop!" and ran over to stop them, but felt something grab at her ankles and trip her to the floor. She bumped her head and became dazed. She looked up and through blurred vision saw a little boy with bloodshot eyes on all fours like an animal staring at her. Charlotte could hear feet scurrying around the room. She quickly came to her senses and got up to save her daughters. The kids were gone, and the room was quiet. She rushed over to Clara, whose mouth was full of pills. Charlotte turned her over and the pills spilled out of her mouth. "Clara!" she yelled, but Clara didn't wake up. "Oh God, no, please!" There were the sounds of children laughing and running throughout the house. Charlotte grabbed Clara and Kate and ran into the living room. She grabbed the car keys and looked back and saw nothing. "Mommy," Clara groggily said. She was waking up. Kate was now crying. Charlotte was beyond scared. "It's okay. We're leaving. Mommy's not gonna let anything happen to you." On the way to the car, Charlotte heard things being thrown around in the house and a little girl's voice calling for Clara. She put the girls in the car and looked back at the now quiet house and saw 3 kids standing in front of the house, watching them. They just stood there in the dark, in the rain. Charlotte drove away and went straight to the nearest hospital to get help for Clara. Fortunately, Clara would be okay, as she had only swallowed 1 pill and would only suffer a little drowsiness until it wore off. Charlotte only returned to the house to retrieve her and the girls' things and move back to the city. Surprisingly, the owner of the house had no problem with her packing up and leaving so quickly. It was as if he almost expected it. Hello all, and thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you've liked this content, please click the like button, share, and subscribe to receive notifications for new dark stories. Until the next time, be good to each other. It's a scary world out there.